engineering found a way. To fix this, railroad engineers created a raised pathway using long trestles and carefully engineered approaches for trains to safely cross the river. Once a plan was made to address the necessary elevation issue, engineers found the balance they needed. That included the wide valley here through this part of rural Aurora, giving engineers the room they needed to build the long trestles that made that 1908 crossing possible. As side benefits, this route also provided access to communities on the way to Salem through much of what was then called French Prairie. Plus, it was a path that could challenge the competing and more established Southern Pacific Railroad. So from the beginning in 1908, the Oregon Electric Railway had an early win over one of its greatest obstacles, the Willamette River. That bridge provided a reliable crossing for decades. In 1933, the Oregon Electric Railway's passenger service formally ended, in part due to the growing improvements of car travel. Yet the bridge at Aurora continued to dutifully perform its job carrying freight. Then in July 1939, disaster struck when the original wood trestle approach on the Aurora side caught fire. While the damage was serious, it was quickly repaired and service resumed, allowing trains to continue crossing there. Another change occurred in 1945 when the conversion from electric to diesel trains was made. Crews pulled down the old overhead electric wires and decommissioned the electric substations feeding them. The rails stayed in place and kept being used, except now with diesel locomotives instead of the electric trains they replaced. But the biggest change to the river crossing was still ahead. That's because the original bridge that had carried trains across the Willamette River for well over half a century was reaching the end of its useful life. By 1973, the old bridge struggled with modern, heavy freight loads, so Burlington Northern began a massive project to replace it. The engineering challenge was immense. You can't shut down a train for 2 years while building a new one. So how do you replace a bridge that trains still need every day? Shifting the footprint. This required a lot of planning for both construction and deconstruction. Burlington Northern's goal was to minimize disruptions to freight traffic while shifting the nearby path of the tracks. So there was a lot to do in what would comprise a 2-year project. So on August 1st, 1973, work began on the new bridge. And those amazingly heavy concrete piers you may have noticed sunk deep into the Willamette River? They're the foundation supporting not just massive passing trains, but much of the bridge itself. Yet the old piers weren't reused. Interestingly, rail service continued on the old bridge during much of the construction. This allowed that old bridge to remain fully operational, with heavy machinery pouring concrete for the new piers just feet away. Then, after 2 years, when the new bridge was completed in August 1975, the line was briefly closed. Approaching tracks on both sides of the Willamette River were then physically curved to align with the new bridge deck, now shifted slightly eastward. Crews then cut the old rails on both banks, then realigned them and spiked down new connections running next to the old track. The very first train rolled over the new alignment that same day, and the old 1908 bridge was subsequently cut up for scrap. Phantom Railway. South of the Willamette River in rural Aurora today, you can hear a freight train rumble past. From a distance, it looks like railroad tracks heading into the wild. But nearby, there's a second, invisible track running parallel to it. Close up, you see something really surprising: the imprint of a second faded track next to today's active railroad. That faint scar across the landscape is evidence of the original Oregon Electric Railway. No train has traveled there for more than 50 years, but the old route remains etched into the ground, a ghost of the railroad that once carried passengers through Aurora. Aurora's ghost rail path is what remains of an electric railway with a phantom track. For more than half a century, trains rolled along this deserted path. Why move a railroad line a few yards over, then slice a new path through the forest for the old one to only be swallowed by nature. Engineers blazed a new section here to better ease trains on and off the new span. Now disconnected from its former line, the old railroad slowly vanishes into the forest. When it opened in 1908, the Oregon Electric Railway marked a transportation shift that would later haunt its future. The irony is that three seemingly unrelated events with a connection to the railway occurred that very same year. That's because the Aurora Railway Bridge was completed in 1908. Then Fred Prawl, the Aurora Bridge's roadmaster who oversaw construction of the Willamette River Bridge, died soon after, followed by introduction of the first Model T automobile. That's worth remembering because the Model T opened a new path of transportation with a subsequent transportation battle that impacted rail lines everywhere, including here in Aurora, Oregon. The Oregon Electric Railway was created mainly with passenger use in mind. Yet over time, railroads that thrived were built around freight support. Because the Oregon Electric Railway was built for everyday passenger travel, that difference placed it squarely at odds with the car. The Oregon Electric Railway was initially popular with its fast and frequent travel, moving folks between growing communities. But as cars improved and highways expanded, trains were used less for everyday trips. Railroads remained the most efficient way to move heavy goods over long distances, as they continue to do more than a century later. So the next time you look west at the train bridge from Interstate 5, consider it as not just a story of an old, now forgotten railroad, but instead the start of a future that arrived fast, then changed Aurora, before quietly slipping into history. It reminds us that progress isn't a straight line. Sometimes the future arrives early, shines brightly for a while, then quietly slips into the Oregon landscape, waiting to be discovered once again.